May you have auspiciousness and causes of success. May you have the confidence to always do your best. May you take no effort in your being generous, sharing what you can, nothing more, nothing less. May you know the meaning of the word happiness. May you always lead from the beating in your chest. May you be treated like an esteemed guest. May you get to rest, may you catch your breath. May the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrow.
Everybody, this is Lee Norwood with Annapolis College Consulting, and I'm so excited to be here today with my student-led Q&A session about Vote 2020. We have 5 students from the Anne Arundel County and Howard County school systems that are here today to ask some questions of Delegate Heather Bagnall with the Maryland General Assembly and the House of Delegates, here to answer questions from a Democratic standpoint, because that is the ticket that she ran on, but also we're kind of a bipartisan voice to have kids talking to kids about why they need to go out there and vote. So.
Okay, so since I'm almost 18, what do you think the number one thing is that I should know about what's on the ballot for this presidential election?
So much of what we do is supposed to be it's a cooperative effort between the multiple branches of government. And so when we're looking at the ballot, when we're looking at the presidential race, there's much more that's impacted than simply the decisions that the president makes. Congress is on the ballot. All of those Senate races, the House races, the determination of leadership within those chambers. In Anne Arundel County, we have 3 Board of Education seats that are on the ballot. And it's the first time that these districts have ever been able to vote for their Board of Ed members. Now, that in such a consequential race, that can really get lost in the shuffle. But things like Board of Education, judges, your local representation are really essential because the decisions that they make tend to have a much more immediate impact on their constituents than the decisions that are made at the federal level.
So I saw that on your website that you wanted to start implementing like more of the arts in our new curriculum, and you wanted to basically like change our curriculum and help combat bullying and racism like within the school population. How do you think we'll be able to replicate that on a national level? And how do you think the Democratic Party will like approach that?
Well, and I will say it's an easier ask at the local level than it is at the national level, because there is, in terms of how we do it nationally, part of it is getting, I hate to say it, but getting Betsy DeVos out of that seat. She's in charge of education, and her priorities are not arts integration. If we can get people in those positions that understand the value of the arts and also the connection of the arts, that arts integration is actually what connects and unsilos all of those other disciplines, then we can actually have a much more productive federal conversation on overhauling our education system. And we know that we can do it.
So I guess, Carson, one of our homework assignments is going to be to see who's running for the Board of Education and find out what their thoughts are.
All right. I just want to ask, from a national standpoint, let's say that this pandemic continues or another international emergency happens. What do you think would be the best course of action to counteract something so catastrophic like we've seen with COVID?
Well, I think the biggest lesson from COVID, which really shouldn't have been a lesson, it should have been obvious, but that we need a national coordinated effort. Even at the state level, we pushed it down to the counties, which wasn't a bad thing. But what we didn't do is that we didn't use the time that we had, because when things were shut down, we asked people to stay in their homes. And we said, we need this time to build out the systems to accommodate the other crises that are going to arise from this. And we didn't use that time effectively. We didn't have a statewide coordinated effort to deal with education, to deal with the nursing homes, to deal with the reopening and the closures, to deal with I don't know if I said unemployment, sorry. But all of these other systems that we needed to have in place ready to go.
So I saw that you were on your website, you were also talking about keeping hospitals informed about what beds are available for people that are suicide. And that hits close to home to me because I waited, I think it was 2 or 3 days I waited in the hospital waiting for a bed. So what would that system look like, and how would it kind of change in a way that's good but also doesn't change too drastically so that we can still help people that need it?
Because the challenge with crisis beds, and for anyone who doesn't know this, the crisis beds can be for any sort of behavioral health concern, whether it's mental or whether it's substance use. But we were focusing on mental health crises. And within that category, there are subcategories, like there's adolescent crisis beds, which we have a huge deficit for. In fact, I believe we have no pediatric psychiatrists on the whole of the Eastern Shore right now. So we have a huge deficit when it comes to adolescent care, which has actually become my main focus now with my legislative priorities. Then we also have cognitive disorders, dementia, autism, and then you also have, within the cognitive disorders, you can have violent behavior. All of those require different resources. So we are creating a crisis bed registry that identifies not just what's available, but what services they can accommodate. The other piece, once we have that, is that then we have to go back and look at how we accommodate waiting lists, because right now in the state of Maryland, you cannot get on a waiting list for a crisis bed. So even if you identify one, you get somebody in a vehicle, you get them over to a bed that might be an hour or two away, it might not be available by the time you get there, which is the other reason we need the bed registry. Unfortunately, that piece of legislation was vetoed by the governor, which we're still a little stymied by that decision, but we will be picking it up again.
So go for it.
Mm-hmm. With President Trump's repeal of certain trans rights and his kind of, how can I say this? His kind of disdain towards the LGBTQ community, with openly saying he doesn't agree with gay marriage, and he just flat out doesn't agree with the community as a whole. What do you think the Democratic Party would do for the LGBTQ community that Trump has tried to, silence, or it's kind of just silence?
Well, I think the first thing the Democratic Party will do is they will codify into law the things that were executive orders, or they were policies, but they weren't law. And I think if we've learned a very, very profound lesson from the last 3.5 years, it's that just because we've done it doesn't mean it's the law. And one of the things that we did in Maryland is we actually codified the Affordable Care Act protections into state law in case that federal law went away, because until this year, our state law was tied to it. So if it was repealed, it automatically repealed our state protections. And I think the Democrats, I think we have to go back and codify into law these protections that were policy, but they were never the law. And the thing about being a legislator is that you try and write laws as a last resort. You try and work with policy and regulation first, because it's more cost effective. It tends to be a more streamlined process. You know, writing a law and passing a law is an arduous process by design, because it should be. It shouldn't be easy to pass a law, because otherwise you could pass a law to, you know, to go after anyone you didn't like, or you could pass an arbitrary law that benefited you. And so it's an arduous process. But that being said, human rights should be codified into law. Civil rights should be codified into law. I ran for office because I was concerned immediately after the election about the well-being of my immediate sphere. I work in the theater, and I feared right after the election that everyone I knew was in jeopardy. And unfortunately, that has come to pass. And so I think the Democrats absolutely have to codify into law these protections so that they cannot so easily be dismissed.
Kids don't care about Social Security, right? These kids don't care about some things that I'm going to be voting on. So if you could just pick 3 issues, Heather, that you think these kids should dive into and learn more about, and maybe share outward with their friends, what 3 issues do you think that this age group, who's going to be our future and our future leaders, should really know a lot about before they go into the voting booth?
I'm a Gen Xer, and so we were told the entire time we were children, well, Social Security will be out of money by the time you're. But we were raised on a lie. I actually think I understand why Social Security wouldn't be on your mind, on your radar, but the fact that the reason that we are in the dire straits for Social Security that we are is because we borrowed against investments that the American taxpayer made. And that is why it should be a priority for you.
Okay.
Because we as a nation said, we want you to invest this money because this is your social safety net for when you retire. And then we borrowed against it and we took money out of it, basically to put into the military. Probably much more aware of that than our generations. And outside of intersectionality, which I think young people understand in a way that adults cannot wrap their heads around. You know, the fact that policies affect different communities in different and incredibly profound ways. And that when you're looking at policies and policymakers, you really need to hold them accountable to their making sure that they're looking at it through more than one lens.
I think we all need to do a little bit of research before we go to the polls, and hopefully we will be sending out information to our friends. And these kids are awesome, and they are more educated now after spending just a bit of time with you. And I just think it's just so important. So Heather, thank you for your time.
I told you, here's to the hearts that you're gonna break. Here's to the lives that you're gonna change. Here's to the infinite possible ways to love you. I want you to have it. Here's to the good times we're gonna have. You don't need money, you got a free pass. Here's to the fact that I'd be sad without you. I want you to have it all. Sad without you. I want you to have it all.